Welcome to the Wisdom to Wealth Kingdom podcast. I'm super excited because we have another guest. This is the podcast where we interview the richest business owners and entrepreneurs in the world as they get to share their journey with us from zero to wealth. And so I am your host, Shamara Star Cox. I'm a TV producer and a marketing coach. I help six-figure business owners and coaches create binge-worthy content so that you can increase your reach, your leads, and your sales. I am also the founder of the Convert Content to Cash Challenge, where I teach you how to create content that sells. So if you want to get access to that challenge, all you have to do is comment challenge accepted below, and I'll be able to send you a personal DM. Today, we have the wonderful guest, Tim Croll, with us. He is a business growth strategist, and you're all going to enjoy his stories that he's going to share as well as what he does. His business success is centered around helping teams and leaders play with Legos. After Tim's appearance on Lego Masters on Fox, he began using Lego and the Serious Play methodology as a way to create teachable moments. He's built his own million-dollar business and has also transformed e-commerce companies into multi-million-dollar monthly sales. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. We are looking forward to your story.
Yeah, it's funny, just even in that bio, it's kind of like, okay, what part of my story do you want to talk about? Because I've got like all these, and I'm sure all the other entrepreneurs are like, man, I can relate to that because, man, I'm going down this path and this path. And so I'm sure we're going to have kind of a little sporadic journey, but we'll get it done. We'll get it done.
Yeah, we definitely will. And you honestly, during the pre-interview, told amazing stories. So once we get there, you'll know exactly which stories to share. Let me ask you this question as we're jumping in right now. Take us on your journey from where you started to where you are now. What struggles did you face, and what was the aha moment that made you realize you were on the right path?
It's a really great question. And because of time constraints, I'm going to kind of speed through a lot of things and just understand that there's a lot more depth behind that. Because if we try to uncover all of those depths, we'd be here for hours and hours. And I'm sure that's why but at the very, very beginning, I grew up in a very conservative home, and they followed a very strict path of, okay, get a job, make sure you go to college, make sure the normal things that happen. I'm a Gen Xer. And so we were always told that that's what we had to do. We had to follow this path, and then you got your golden parachute and retire, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, I wasn't necessarily wired that way. Now, I did. For the short amount of time, I actually did step in and try. So I went to college, I got my degree and did all the things that I was supposed to do, but I could just find that I wasn't really fulfilled, and there was something missing, right? And even in high school, I had been dabbling in baseball cards, this and that, paper, whatever. I was always dabbling in different kinds of sales or businesses and whatnot. And so I started my first business doing construction because that's what I knew. I could build things. Well, we ended up, fast forward this whole aspect of everything. We ended up hitting, I think it was 2007, 2008. I can't remember exactly, but basically all construction fell off the table, and I lost a lot. I lost a couple of houses, got bank repossessed, and I lost some vehicles, and all that kind of stuff happened. And it was at that moment I thought, man, I am on the wrong track. I need to go back to the track of getting a job and doing what society tells me to do. And so I got a job in corporate world. I started up in some sales, did some things, got moved up and through the ranks, and then finally ended up with a large corporate company out of Philadelphia called FXI. At that time, we built a large, it was one product that I broke into an industry. We put that up to about $10 million $10 million a year. And the company decided to sell off that product, and then I no longer have a job. So I'm like back to square one, right? And I'm just like, what the heck? I thought this was going to be secure, and I thought this was going to be stable, and I thought this was going to be, and it wasn't, right? And so that opened my eyes back. Okay, so maybe this first track was right. Maybe I need to go back to that. Maybe I need to go back to this aspect that really fulfills me. And that's when I started kind of dabbling and partnering up with different individuals. And the next step was we did a company called Sunfrog. Frankly, it was selling T-shirts. It was at the beginning phases of this Facebook craze where we could just post things out and everybody would see everything. We didn't have to pay for ads. And we built that T-shirt company to around $12 to $15 million a month just selling T-shirts. So a lot of fun, a lot of exciting things, right? But at the same time, I watched a lot of those because I built the affiliate base. And so I had probably dozens of different individuals that were making $1 million pluses because of their commissions and bonuses and so on. But I watched their lives implode about a year or two after they were doing things. And so all of this stuff was starting to add in, a couple of other things that were going on. And so now I've gotten to the point where I've seen, experienced, built, done and my heart's desire. And that's why the Lego comes in. And after the Lego Masters and whatnot, I tie together all the things that I've experienced and learned and really try to help leave an impact on individuals so that as they're growing their business or they're growing their wealth or their what they would call their success, they really need to look at that and define and say, okay, what does success really look like in my life? Because at the end of the day, the money all goes. I mean, there's times when it's just gone and there's times when you get it back. But there are certain things in personal development, and that's what I choose to focus on now, is just making sure that I can help develop and impact and grow people. And we do that through Lego activities. So
Love it.
Ask questions though, because like I said, a lot of it's deeper than.
But I love so much. You took us on a roller coaster ride just now. Like you just jumped right into it, and there were a couple of things you said that I'm sure a lot of our viewers could relate to. And as you all are watching, let me know if you can relate to this. Tim said that he grew up in a society or in a household where they were saying things like, go to college, you'll get your secure job, like all, and he did those things, right? Like even that happened to me too. And I'm a millennial. So that narrative is still being spread. And I know that for me, I went to college, I had the honors, I graduated from college, but when I graduated, it was the recession. So I couldn't even find a job.
Yeah.
I remember just being super frustrated, having all these honors on my wall, telling me how great I was, but then I couldn't find a job. But then here you were, right? You were working in corporate, and then you started your own business. Things were good. But then you went back to corporate because you were wondering, like, am I on the right track? And I'm sure there's a lot of viewers now. And if you are, you could just type a yes in the chat as you're on here watching. Can you relate to Tim, where you started your own business and then some part of you keeps wondering, should I go back to the corporate? Well, here was Tim. He went back to corporate only to find out, oh my goodness, this isn't stable and this isn't secure. I love
that's
that.
the greatest. That's one of the false narratives, right? Is the fact that, well, if you get a job, you're going to be good for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And if you get that, if you go to college and get that job, then everything's going to be fine. And frankly, that's just a false narrative that we have within our society. And I mean, I don't care what. I'm glad you mentioned the millennial Gen X, because we've all gone through that, right? And I would even say, as we look at it across race and gender and age and all of those things, and we all have these different false narratives that they just keep pounding at us, right? And so I was actually doing a couple of conversations, but there's a subconscious belief that we automatically accept that this is the way that we have to do life, and whether that means your job, your education, whatever. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. There is not a specific set way that you're going to walk through this life and find that this is success. You have to define your success, because it's going to be different for a lot of people.
Yes, you are setting so many people free here, right? And oftentimes we follow this narrative because of some type of fear, right? Like we want to be secure. We want to be stable, because if we're not, then there's this fear that we won't have the money. But you shared something. You said the money going to come and go. In here has to be right. So I remember you and I talking in the pre-interview that you actually have a method to overcome fear, or at least to manage it. I would love for you to share that with us and share how you arrived at it.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I've been teaching quite a bit, but the real realization for me is that you remember things better through stories. And so I had a near-death experience. I almost drowned on a river. And we were doing kayaking. I'm very much an outdoor. You can kind of see there's stuff all over the place. I've got waterfalls, and my daughter drew stuff in the back, all this kind of stuff. And so I'm I love the adventure. I love life and how the adventure approaches us, because my personal goal is I don't want to have a regret because I had a fear, and therefore that fear stopped me from doing something.
Yeah.
And so what I've done is I've looked at this, and so let me just kind of take you through the trip of the kayaking thing, where we were at, because this was in the beginning of the season. We're from Michigan. Kind of give you a quick little background. We're from Michigan. We do a lot of water activities. In fact, we have more coast in Michigan than Florida. So we have more coastline than Florida. We actually have the second most amount of coastline. Alaska's number 1, Michigan's number 2. Wow. And that's because of all the Great Lakes that surround, and we've got a lot of water, massive amounts of water. And so a lot of our activities during the summer, spring, fall, all of that, it focuses on water. Do a lot of kayaking. Well, on the one time we were planning on going to kayaking. This was early in the spring. It was just after all the defrost of the snow and everything. So the water levels were definitely a little bit high. And so I started doing my research, and this is the very, very first point, is you need to analyze what is going on. You got to identify the things that are happening, right? And so I actually had to analyze and figure out, okay, what the heck is going on with the water? Are we able to go? I do all my research on that before before I even make a plan or before I ever do anything. And so we kind of saw that the water was a little bit high, but it wasn't above. It wasn't a dangerous stage. It was just a little bit above. Now, fast forward, I get to day of, we're standing on the bank, and that water's a little more freaky than I thought it was going to be. So we're literally standing there, right? And I'm like, okay, that fear is starting to kick in because I'm watching this water speed by where it usually is really calm. And I'm like, okay, I don't know, man. I don't know. So as we kind of look at this, I recognize that there was this anxiety that was starting to grow and starting to build. And once I could feel that anxiety start to grow, that's when I had to identify and say, okay, number one, did I do all of my research? Did I look back and say, okay, yes, we're okay. Yes, it's not flooding. Yes, it's not doing all these things. Did I look back and say, yes, everything should be okay? That's where we're at, right? So we have to, first of all, identify, is it a fear? And what is that fear specifically? So that's part of it. And then make sure that you go back as far as the analytics side of that, right? So here we go. Stepping in, I'm like, okay, yeah, I did my homework. I did all my research. It is a kind of a fear there that I'm just a little bit nervous about and whatever. But I have to create my plan. My plan is, this is what we have to do. We have to make sure we know where all of the heights in the waters, and then make sure that we do as much as we can, and we create that plan. The third step, though, is I got to put my butt in that seat.
That part.
So there's the thing, right? So as we look at this whole mastering the fear aspect, yes, there's this planning. Yes, there's the analytical and the research. Then there's the creating the plan based on the analytics and the research. And whether you're talking about a business and developing a business or any of those other things in life, those two things go first, 1, 2. But the one that we often skip because of fear is that action.
Yes.
Putting our butt in that seat.
Yep.
I literally physically had to get into the water and put my butt into that seat, right? And so as we're going down, I mean, yeah, we're seeing some dangers, we're seeing some things, but we had planned for them. We had adjusted some of our the ways that we were doing things. We put together a group, and then sometimes one of the more experienced people were in the back, making sure everybody was able to get through the rapids or get through the deadfalls or get through these things. And we were acting on our plan, enjoying ourselves and having a great time. And then it happened. Change. Something in the world changed, right? Something unexpected changes. Something smacks you out of the clear blue sky, and you're not even realizing that that's what's going on. And it's at that point in time when you really have to learn how to be able to adapt. Yeah. Because our environment is going to change very, very quickly. And like you mentioned, you got out of college, and next thing you know, it's like, hey, we're in a recession and I can't find a job anywhere. So what are you going to do as far as being able to change, right? So keep in mind, we're on 4. So 1 is research, analyze, then make sure you identify the things that are making you afraid so you can do that. Number 2, create the plan. Number 3 is make sure you act. So implement on that plan. Okay, this is all about the action. And then number 4 is you have to adapt right in the middle of it.
Nice.
And you have to allow yourself to adapt in the middle of it. So here we are, we're going down the river, and we come up on a deadfall. And one of the things that we had planned for is if we see deadfalls, you got to get out on the river. Then you got to basically port your kayak or port your stuff around. And the first person that's up front calls out, hey, everybody out, or whatever. We're using very clear language to make sure that everybody's getting out as quickly as possible so we don't have any threats of life or damage or whatever. And so I was in the back following everybody up. The guy up in front says, hey, everybody out. So everybody's going to the side. Well, what we didn't realize is that when the 2 of us, there was 2 of us right in the back, when we went to the side, it was still super deep. There's about 4 to 5 feet of water there. And so as we went out, he jumped out. He almost got sucked in under a piece of a deadfall, and he made it just fine. But it slowed me down, so I couldn't quite get to the bank. Well, what happens in a kayak is when you come up and you hit, you're always going to turn sideways and parallel with whatever the deadfall is. A deadfall is a tree that comes down across the river, and you cannot get over it. You basically have to get out and go around it. And when you come up along that, there's obviously the roundedness of a tree trunk or a tree or whatever it is, and your kayak will start to hit that side. As it hits the side, the side that's towards the water will dip down, causing the rest of the water to pour in, and immediately you'll get flipped. I don't care how well of a kayaker you are, how experienced you are, immediately you're going to go over. And so that's what happened. Because I wasn't able to get to the side quick enough, I hit that, and I was immediately underneath of the water. And it was at that moment that you panic. Right. And those are the times, and I'm telling you, in business, I have felt this panic more often. Sometimes it's that sleepless, you wake up in the middle of the night, like, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll. I don't know how I'm going to get these sales in. I don't know. You have to learn how to be able to calm yourself down. And this goes back to what we just talked about. Identify that fear. What is it that's really causing that significant fear? Because if you can identify it, you quantify.
Yeah.
And when you quantify, you actually put it into a box. Let me give you this other little piece before we finish that story. Oftentimes, what I have found in my own life is that fear will duplicate its power over you when there's more than one thing. So, for example, let's say you're worrying about 4 or 5 different things within the business. The weight of that worry, the weight of that fear will be multiplied times however many things you are worried about, right? So if it's just one thing, and then now you add 4 more things onto it, you feel like that one thing weighs as much as all 5 or 4 to 5 things together, right? And so when you're dealing with fear, if you can quantify that and say, this is the specific thing that I'm afraid of, now it becomes smaller. It becomes manageable. And if you focus on the fear, what will happen? It's like this blackness, this shadow that's just outside that door. And then think of that in your mind, like you're just outside. If you focus on that fear will grow, causing you to shrink back into a closet, shrink back into a spot where you feel quote unquote safe or comfortable, and you will not act. You will not go out of your closet door, your bedroom door, your living room door, and finally out you have to act and move towards that fear. So you have to quantify it. So here I am, flipped in an instant underneath of the water, and the only thing I can think of is, where's the light? Where's the light? Because that's the surface. That's the only way that I know that I can get to it. And I have to say this too, because I do believe it was a miracle, and I believe God intervened. Because when I reached up, I don't even recall doing this, but I reached up and I grabbed the branch with both hands, and I couldn't see it because obviously I'm flipping around and all kinds of things. And I grabbed these branches, and I was able to get my head just above the water enough to breathe. And I couldn't figure out what was going on because I was stuck. The weight of the kayak and the weight of the water, even if you're in 4 or 5 feet of water, it's extremely pushy. And so the weight was all I could do just to keep my head above water. And so as soon as everybody realized how serious the situation was and that I wasn't coming up out of the water, everybody came, because this is where now, and this is another really key principle, is you have to have community in order to survive.
Come on.
Because if you don't have people around you that you trust and basically trust with your life, you're going to be drowning and feel like you're the only one. And this is a whole nother rabbit trail that I could go down, because one of the other great narratives is that you're the only one going through whatever it is. And that's absolutely false. Absolutely false. And so I had everybody kind of come to me immediately to be able to say, okay, how can we help? Now, the problem is they don't know what's going on, right? And as men, I can speak for men, and maybe it's the way for women as well. But the one thing that we're taught is that we shouldn't ask for help. We shouldn't talk about our problems. We shouldn't talk about our challenges, and we should just man up and do it, like pull us up by the bootstraps kind of a thing. And this is really critical. And I know this is obvious here. It's not so obvious in our business. I had to sit there and calm my butt down.
Yeah.
Quantify what is it I'm afraid of. Well, I'm afraid of dying.
Yes. Yes.
But I had to calm down and say, okay, what's going on? What are the problems? And how do I create a plan to be able to get out of that? Because this is life and death. And sometimes we still feel that same fear in our businesses, but you can still do the exact same process of being able to identify, plan, and act, right? That's exactly what you have to do, and then adapt as things change.
Yeah.
And so they all come up, and my son is the first one to get there, and he says, Dad, I don't know what to do. I can't pull you up. I can't pull the kayak up. I can't pull, I don't know what to do. So, okay, I have to calm down and say, where am I stuck?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And I couldn't move my feet. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't move my feet at first. So then by the time I got myself calmed down, this is all happening within minutes, right?
Yeah.
It feels like an eternity,
Yeah.
but within minutes. And so I realized that the cord that holds the kayak to, or the paddle to the kayak so we don't lose them, got wrapped around my feet somehow, like just a strange thing. So I said, Zach's my son. I said, Zach, something's wrapped around my legs. I don't know. I can't move my legs. He's like, okay, so can you lift your legs up? I can't see it. I can't reach it. So I'm like, okay, let's see if I can at least bend my knees to get my legs to come up a little bit so he can. I was able to do that. Next thing you know, he's like, oh, this is simple. He just whoop, whoop, and my legs are free. And the next thing I know, I can put my feet down. And next thing I know, I'm up on the log, and I'm no longer just about ready to die here. And so it's just that simple, a couple of simple steps. Now, one, if I had been alone, I'd be dead, because my legs are wrapped. The kayak is being pushed by the water, forcing it to come down further, and all of these things. And so, I mean, when I tell you my adrenaline, I mean, when I was shaking, like I was shaking, because you're going through that. And sometimes that's what it feels like when we're going through business. We get that intense adrenaline rush. And this is the final thing here, is you have to allow yourself to be able to calm down.
Yes.
Let that emotion drain. Feel it. And trust me when I say this, you're going to feel it. And it's okay to feel that emotion. But you got to be able to let that drain and then get to the point of being able to say, all right, I made it. I did everything that I was supposed to do. Now my biggest step is, am I going to get back in the water? That water almost just killed me. Am I going to get back in that water?
Whew.
And I tell you what, man, there's very, very few times now when I put my butt in that kayak seat that I don't think, dude, that was close. Do I really want to do this? Right. But and here's the other component of this. It was probably one of the best trips that we've had because we got to see some incredible beauty, some incredible things, was able to share it with like 6 other guys. We were able to do a lot and be able to have that memory, regardless of the risk that was going on. And again, I would relate this directly to whatever business you're in, whether you're working for somebody or whether you're starting and doing and creating your own business. There's going to be a lot of fear. There's going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be a lot of risk. As you go through that, though, the reward and the benefit of being able to act and push forward and do things and mastering that fear is what's going to make it all worthwhile. Because that success of personal development is going to far outweigh any money that you make, any of the fame, or any of the times that you're on platform, or any of the other things that are going on. Your personal development is the highest payback reward that you can have in your life. And so like I said, those are the 4 things. That's what I always do. And I can give them to you again. Identify exactly what's going on, make that plan, act on it. And then you have to adapt. You have to be willing to adapt.
Your story, first of all, I felt the fear when you were just speaking and sharing. And the whole time my mind is like, oh my goodness, this man is about to die. But in that moment of death, of near to death, you're telling yourself you have to calm down. You have to calm down, because if you don't calm down, you won't be able to clearly communicate where you need help. And there's a lot of business owners, as you said, that they experience this type of fear, whether they're going to miss payroll, they're not getting enough sales, or they're afraid to get on camera. And they can't seem to get past that fear. They get stuck, and they get stuck there for months. But here you were able to develop an entire philosophy, or I should say framework. You develop an entire framework from that situation. My favorite part is adapt. I think oftentimes, like, we plan, we get ready, and then something crazy happens, but we don't adapt. We end up just either going with it, crying about it, being mad about it. I'm the same way. This entire year I've been mad about how things were going. And it wasn't until like maybe this month or August, really, I had to tell myself, no, you have to adapt. Things aren't always going to go the way that you plan. And either you're going to fail or you're going to succeed. So I love that story. That story was so powerful. We have some people writing inside the chat now saying, yep, that's what's happening to me now. My business is keeping them up at night, right? And what you're sharing is really, really helpful. Okay,
I'm going to say this because I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of business owners, everybody from service type businesses where they're in the homes to e-com type businesses to high-level CEOs doing multi-million. And I've worked with them through the Lego aspect. And I can say this verbatim across the board in every situation is you will be dealing with the problems that you can attain to. And that sounds really weird. Let me break that down a little bit more. No matter what, we're going to face problems. There's never a time in your life when it's going to be smooth sailing. And the reason why I can say that is because I've dealt with companies and businesses that are doing, maybe $50,000 to $70,000 a year, all the way up to doing millions of dollars of business per year. And in each situation, they have their own set of problems. They keep growing, they become better, they become stronger, and then now they're able to face bigger and tougher challenges. And so as you grow through that, I want to make this really clear is that life never stops. In your life, you will never stop growing. There are 4 areas that you have to constantly be focused on, but you never stop growing. And in all the businesses that I've worked with and consulted with and coached, that is the one constant thing is there's always going to be something there that you're going to have to face. You're going to have to identify, plan, and then act and put that in motion. So whether it's, like you said, getting on camera, if it's that may be the thing. It may be payroll. It may be, I don't know if I'm going to get the sales in. I don't know if there's all kinds of things that are going to happen.
Yep. I love it. I actually want to read this comment. You can't see it because it's on Instagram, but we have a guest who's watching right now. Her name is Sina, and she says she's not a business owner yet, but she's interested in starting up. The economy is unpredictable right now with major stores closing down due to the recession and inflation. And I just feel like that's what you're talking about right now. There's always going to be something that's happening. There's always going to be some type of fear that's going to happen in our life. But we really should follow the framework you shared, which is for us to identify, right? For us to plan, for us to take action. That's the biggest part, because you can do all the planning, but if you never take action, you'll never see growth. And then for us to adapt, because there's always going to be some type of recession. Like I said, in 2008, 2009, there was a recession. I graduated in 2009. There was a recession, right? There's always going to be some type of inflation. Something's always going to come up. But as you said, this adds to our growth. Like you overcome one area, and all it's going to do is make you better for the next area. So I love that. Okay, so go ahead.
I was going to say with her, I want to be really careful. I'm not trying to get political in any way, but there's always challenges. If the red wins this season, there's challenges. If the blue wins this season, there's challenges. And it's different challenges. So you can sit there and say, well, I don't want to start a business because what if blue wins? Or I don't want to start a business because what if red wins? And I don't want to. It's always going to be going, right? There's always going to be this stuff. And so right now, probably the biggest thing that people are thinking about is the political atmosphere, because we don't know who's going to be the next person that's going to get into office. We don't know who's going to have the control. And so that directly affects whether or not we want to take risk or we want to actually step out and do that. So that's one. Two is now we're talking about economy. And now we're talking about the recession. We're talking about inflation and things that are going on. It's always going to happen. Yes. There's always going to be that kind of a thing. So like you just mentioned, and I mean, I'm 50, so I'm getting a little bit older, right? And I can tell you, I have seen things go up and I've seen things go back down, and I've seen things go back up. This last year, definitely I have another business that's called, we sell Lego sets. This year I've seen it drop down. As the previous year, we had higher sales. This year's is lower. So again, identify, plan, and act. You have to do all three of those, because maybe it's not the right time for that style of business. Maybe it needs to wait a little bit, or maybe you need to adjust it. That's the adapting part. Maybe you need to kind of find a different need that's going to be able to be filled, but there's always needs. There's always opportunity. It's always going to be there. So you have to follow the framework. I don't know what else to say. You have to follow the framework.
Follow the framework, because it helps you to overcome the fear so you can take action. Yes. And oftentimes business owners get stuck in the not taking action part but crying about not being successful. So there was one thing you shared, and we didn't really get to go into details about Legos, right? But I want to know, when it comes to calming yourself down when you're experiencing the fear, is there a scenario that you walk your clients through with the Legos to help them to calm down?
Oh, there's a lot of them. So I have a lot of different experiences of doing the actual pieces and parts in that. In fact, probably the greatest example of this is when I work with kids, because kids' energy is really, really high. And sometimes they have a higher expectation of themselves than what they anyway. So the point is, you got to breathe. You have to take that time. And this goes back to one of the building parts that I have, one of the 4 building pillars that I have that I use when I talk about personal development, but it's this quietness. It's that unplugging. So often we get, whether it's social media, news outlets, whatever it is, it's speaking and yelling at us, and our adrenaline builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, right? And as that adrenaline builds, our emotions start to get really more intense. We lose the ability to make decisions and creatively solve issues. There's a lot of things that come along with that. It is absolutely key to unplug. And I highly recommend this. It's not a Lego thing per se, but it's the ability to set it down. Because if I have whatever build I'm doing, so whether it's this one or any of these other things that I'm doing here, if I'm stuck and I set it down for a minute and step away, now I can come back to it with a fresh set of energy. And that includes the ability to creatively think through the decision, the ability to have my emotions calm down, to have my physical energy back up. There's a lot of things. You have that quietness that's necessary in order to accomplish the next task. It's an unplugging.
Oh, I love it. And we hear it, but when it comes to putting it into action, a lot of times we just don't put it into action. Sometimes it could be because we don't really know what to do. Like some people, they just turn off social media and that's it. But sometimes you have to unplug from family. Sometimes
Speaking there, I love that. Sometimes it is family.
It is. you got to unplug from friends, right? So that you can be able to recuperate and then go back to it. But here's
Can I give a practice?
Yeah, go
This
ahead.
is one practice that I've used in a lot of my things. It's called the drainers and the drivers, or you can call them the boosters and the whatever. You can use whatever words you want on this. But it's very, very key. You have one sheet of paper. And what you do and this is up to you on the timeline, I usually recommend it's between 10 and 20 days. If I'm really intense, it's going to be 30 days. Limit at least, you got to do it at least 7 days. On that sheet of paper, split it right down the middle. On one side, you have drainers, and on the other side, you have drivers. Drainers are things that drain your energy. If you hate responding to email, if you hate details or bookkeeping or P&Ls or whatever you hate, maybe sometimes speaking publicly, going on, what are the things that you hate and that you do? And you have to put those down on the list. On the other side are your drivers, things that you love to do. It's the things that you like get up in the morning and you're like, man, I get to do this. Monday morning's coming around. I can't wait to be able to go do this.
Nice.
All right. So the practice is this. You want to write down everything that you do throughout the day in one of those two sides, black and white. It's either a drainer or it's a driver. The next step of this is now to analyze that. So as you look at that, the goal is to have a longer list of drivers, things that are going to give you energy, than the list of drainers. If you can keep that drivers list longer, you'll have a more healthy life. You'll have a better ability to be able to solve problems. Now, the drainers, sometimes you have to do them because nobody else is going to do them. You got to do it, right? There's some things that you have to do. And there's a whole list of things for eat the frog. That's one. I mean, there's like a whole list of things that you can use to be able to accomplish that. But I like this one. Do, delete, and there's another D. I forgot the other D. Dang it. See, I'm on the spot and I forgot.
Maybe it was dang it. Do, delete, dang it. No, I'm kidding.
Delegate. That's what it is. I knew I was going to get it. Do, delete, or delegate, right? So that's the choice that you have on the drainers. You either just have to do it, you delete it off and get rid of it because it's no use to anybody, or delegate it. Give it to somebody else that's really talented in that area. Do, delete, delegate. So I remembered.
That's good. And that's a lot of D's. Drainers versus drivers. Do, delete, delegate.
Yep.
And I want to share this with you. This morning, I was feeling very overwhelmed in my business, not in a good way, like stressed out, right? Yeah. And I had a thought, which was like, what are the things that you do like about this season? Because I just feel like this season is pretty tough. And so I said, let me actually write down the things that I do like about this season, because over the last couple of months, I've been rehearsing what I dislike. And that has been draining me, right? So today I wrote down like 7 things that I do like, and it actually helped to motivate me. Then I come on this podcast and you share drainers versus drivers. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Right.
Did not know that was a terminology, but I will be doing that more often. That was such an excellent tip. And I know that a lot of people in here are benefiting from everything that you're sharing. I'm not sure if you see the comments, but they're like, yes, I need to unplug. Yes, I love this. Is really helping me. They're even raving about it on Instagram as well. So
the unplug, you have to be intentional with it or you will never do it. I mean, you have to intentionally unplug. We plan a backpacking trip where literally our phones are disconnected. We don't get anything. We are out in the woods, so you have to be intentional with that.
Even like going on a retreat can help with that unplug too. If you want to,
you have to be careful. I agree. Sometimes retreats are incredible and they have such life-giving, but then there's been times I've been on retreats and it's been very draining because of the intensity and the pressure. Yes. And quite frankly, there's some retreats that I go on that I've been on that are very guilt-ridden.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother conversation and a topic that we could talk about. But yes, sometimes it is. But again, that's where the analyze what's going on, make a plan, act on that plan, and then adapt as you're going.
Every time you say adapt, I'm like, that's it right there. Like, we really need to be able to adapt. So I know we're over time, but I just want to thank you. And I want to ask you this final question, which is for the listeners who are so inspired by your story and just the tips that you shared today. How can they work with you? How can they get more of these tips?
Yeah, more of the tips. Just follow me. So I love doing this kind of stuff. And there's 3 things. One is the website, which you see is right there. You can connect with me on that. You can also find out more information about some of the workshops and the Lego and the teaching and the speaking, all that fun stuff that I get to do. But the best way to connect with me is LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and connect with me on there, or you can send me email directly, tim@timcroll.com. It's just basically putting my name in the front of timcroll.com and you're good to go. But listen, I do want to say this. If you're stressed, if you are feeling that pressure and you feel like you're alone, I want you to reach out and I want you to ask or say, hey, look, just this is where I need the area to help. And I promise I will directly respond to all of those. It may not be right away, but I'll directly respond to any emails that come in, because this is one of my passions, is I want to make sure that I'm leaving an impact, but we're changing and doing something different, so that way we can have a better life.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing that. And let me tell you, I dropped his link inside the chat. So if you want to get access, you can go ahead and get access to his website. Again, you can also email him at tim@timcroll.com. And Tim has shared so much with us. Even when I was doing the pre-interview, he shared so much with me that helped me to get some breakthroughs, right? So imagine how much more when you're just exploring his site and following him, because his goal is to leave an impact. And you've already done that in just 36 minutes. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you all for tuning in today. We'll be back again with another episode of Wisdom to Wealth tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks.